Hi, this is Mike Regan. It is my pleasure to welcome you to another On the Record interview with our good friend, Peter Tirschwell. Peter, for many of you, know that he is a vice president with SMP Global Services. He is also responsible for the Journal of Commerce and is the chairman of the TPM conference, which is a must-attend event that's held at the end of February and March each year. It is the go-to source for ocean and a lot of other modes. So, Peter, we've been talking about what's going on with the Pacific Maritime Association and the ILWU for some time. The contract expired July 1st of last year. It is still not negotiated and a settlement. And some things have been occurring over the last couple of weeks that have got our customers and shippers around the globe a bit concerned. Can you share some insights and thoughts about what you're picking up?
Well, they've been negotiating, Mike, since May 10th of last year. So they actually started negotiating even before the contract expired on July 1 of last year. So they've been at this for, more than 13 months. It's been a very long negotiation, and the customers, the shippers or BCOs know that whenever West Coast longshore labor is negotiating a new contract, the risk of disruption is highly elevated versus normal times when they're not negotiating, when they're just working normally. And that has caused a significant diversion of cargo away from the West Coast to the Gulf Coast and to the East Coast. And as the events of the past couple of weeks have illustrated, the shippers were right to divert that cargo. They were exercising prudence and foresight and proper risk management. They had all the evidence that they needed in order to be able to make a good decision, and they are being rewarded for having done so. What is happening is an interesting dynamic that I wrote about last week in the Wall Street Journal, which is that the container market has completely normalized back to 2019 levels, as if the pandemic never even happened, meaning that the freight rates are all the way back down to where they were. So Trans-Pacific Asia to North America freight rates to the West Coast are down to $1,300 a container, $1,500, something like that, depending on which index you are following. The volumes if you were to look at the recent months, the month of May, the month of April, the month of March, the volumes are almost identical to what they were in the same months in 2019. And yet the costs to handle containers have gone up dramatically. So take Maersk, for example, now the number 2 ocean carrier. Their unit cost to carry containers is up something like 25%. Because while some costs will go up and down or are able to be passed on to customers, such as fuel costs, which are subject to fuel surcharges, or other fluctuating costs like vessel charter costs, which go up and down. Other costs, like particularly labor costs, are much harder to get back down. And so, for example, when marine terminal contracts are coming up for renewal with ocean carriers, in the past, a marine terminal operator might have asked for a 5% increase, 6% increase, something like that. Now they're asking for 25 or 30% increases. What that means is that even though the ocean carriers earned staggering profits during the pandemic, they were some of the most profitable companies literally in the world, and they by one estimate, they made more profits during the pandemic period than they had made in the entire history of containerization, going back to Malcolm McLean. That was a company called Sea Intelligence, which made that estimate in a recent report. excellent analysts who we cite in our articles on a regular basis. Nevertheless, when the ocean carriers are looking forward, they are looking at a much less forgiving environment where the rates are low. There is overcapacity in the market. The order book shot up from 6% or 7% of the existing fleet to something like 30%. In other words, the ocean carriers went on a massive ship ordering binge over the last couple of years. Now they have to face the consequences of that. And frankly, they're not showing a lot of interest in agreeing to the type of very, very significant demands for pay increases that the longshoremen are asking for. So, Mike, and I hope you don't feel I'm rambling here, but I will tell you that we reported, Bill Mongaluzzo, our crackerjack veteran West Coast reporter based in LA Long Beach, reported that the longshoremen are asking for a doubling of their salary, the doubling of their hourly wages by the time a 6-year contract has run its course. We picked up some intelligence that is up on our website now, joc.com, just today, which suggests that the longshoremen actually have come off of that lofty demand and are now in the 80% range, meaning that they want their pay to go up 80% over the course of a 6-year contract. The employers are somewhere in the 25-30% range, meaning that they're 40 percentage points separated. And the longshoremen feel, look, we came to work during the pandemic. We had members of our union who died during the pandemic. We showed up for work. We kept cargo moving, and you, the employers, earned untold riches, and we want our piece of that. The employers are saying, who are dominated, the PMA is dominated by ocean carriers, are saying, yeah, we may have made all that money, but going forward, we do not want to saddle ourselves with the type of costs that are being asked for. That right there is the reason why you are now experiencing the worst disruption that has been seen over the past year since these negotiations began. And it's not at all clear that there is an immediate solution that is at hand.
Okay, very briefly, right now, and I think this number is right, the average pay is approximately $200,000 for the people working the cranes and the dock workers.
That is the PMA in a report that they issued last year cited about, I think the number was about 195,000 average pay. Some dock workers, when they have the benefit of working overtime and are able to earn much more than that, they can earn up to $500,000 a year. So they're earning a lot. This is a lot more than average pay in the United States. The longshoremen say that they deserve significant pay increases, that they showed up for work, but they're also not representing a lot of other people who also showed up for work and also didn't have a chance to stay home. Vessel crews, somebody had to operate those ships and bring them across the ocean from Asia. What about the truckers? What about the warehouse workers? What about the last mile delivery folks? So the longshoremen are very simply representing themselves here. Obviously, they're not representing all those other workers. And yet, traditionally speaking, they have held a chokehold over trade. And so they have very significant leverage over the ocean carriers and over the flow of trade in general, which is why they have been able to extract what you might call monopoly rent from the employers, and over the years significantly enrich themselves with fairly lavish pay and benefit packages, including healthcare plans that you and I would love to be able to avail ourselves of.
So just so I have it clear, if the 80% had come off 100 to 80%, that would mean they're making somewhere at the end of the contract between $350 to $400,000 a year.
No, I don't think that's right. Because I don't want to go that far to say that, but
Okay.
because it's the base wages, Mike, that
Okay.
they are asking for the big increases on, and that $200,000 a year number. I don't want to state that I know all the specifics that go into that. Could be pensions
Okay.
are part of it as well. So, but nevertheless, it is a very significant cost increase to the ocean carriers that is being asked for, and the ocean carriers at the moment are balking.
Okay, so the question that a lot of people are going to want to be thinking through, back at TPM, and for those that have never attended a TPM conference, put it in your calendar right now, show up at TPM. It's the go-to event for me and a lot of others, along with places like CSTMP and NITLE. But the question, Peter, at TPM, there was optimism that the strike or the settlement would occur within 2 to 3 weeks of TPM. How did it go off the rails so quickly? And then what's the likelihood? I know it's difficult to project this, but can you foresee at what point in time must there be a settlement, or Washington will get more involved? That just came out. Acting Labor Secretary Sue has been asked to interject herself into the negotiation, similar to what Labor Secretary Walsh did with the rails. Help us decode that.
Well, I mean, there is precedent, because the last time that these two sides were negotiating in 2014 and 2015, there was 6 months of chronic disruption. There was the vessels waiting outside LA Long Beach, not the 109 ships that were waiting out during the height of the pandemic in January of 2022. But there were 30 ships during that time, and President Obama sent his labor secretary, Tom Perez, to knock heads together, and he got a deal done in the spring of 2015. Now, the acting labor secretary is involved in the negotiations, but her ability to get a deal and bridge these two sides is subject to a certain amount of question. The employers are probably asking her, Madam Acting Secretary, would you please try to talk some sense into the labor union, because a deal, an agreement, is the result of compromise, and compromise has to occur on both sides, not just us. The ocean carriers are kind of drawing a little bit of a line here. I mean, they have been pilloried in the U.S. media. President Biden has hammered them relentlessly and held them out as the scapegoat for all the evils of the pandemic and of the supply chain crisis and of inflation. The Ocean Shipping Reform Act of 2022, and I'm not necessarily saying this is wrong or making an editorial judgment about this, but the fact is that the Ocean Shipping Reform Act, the first law to reform ocean shipping practices in 23 years, was passed over the objections of the ocean carriers, and so they've been on the receiving end of public criticism that has been pretty relentless, and I don't know that they are necessarily just going to roll over here and accept the massive wage increases that the longshoremen are asking for. I also don't know, to be honest with you, what leverage the administration has over them. They can't force them to make a deal that they think is economically unjustified. So actually, the talk that we're hearing now is that there's it's unclear which way this will go. For example, the employers might say, you know what, we're done with this. We think this is nonsense, and we're going to proactively shut down the ports ourselves. That's called a lockout. They did it in 2002. The ports were completely shut down for 10 days. Bush 2 invoked Taft-Hartley. Now he's a Republican. Taft-Hartley is considered an anti-labor law, so it's unlikely that Biden would agree to do such a thing, given that he is an ally of labor and arguably the most pro-labor president in a generation. But they might lock him out. The longshoremen might go on strike. They might, because they're essentially at this point, Mike, haggling over wages. I mean, that's the last issue here. They've dealt with the automation issues, the jurisdiction issues, the benefits issues. The two sides announced, I think last July, nearly a year ago, that they had solved the benefits issue, that they had agreed on a benefits package. So now it's all come down to money. And so if that's the case, well, then it's very possible that they may say, look, I'll give you this. Why don't you give me this, and we'll haggle a little bit, and we'll come to an agreement, and we'll shake hands, and call it a day. So even the insiders who we are talking to, and we're talking with people who are very, very close to these negotiations, are saying that it could go one of three ways. Could go strike, could go lockout, could be an agreement. And I don't say those things lightly, Mike, because I'm not engaging here in idle speculation. These are scenarios that we're hearing from people who are extremely close to what's going on at the negotiating table. But the fact of the matter is that this is a very unpredictable, very dynamic, very volatile situation right now, and there's really not a lot of clarity on how it's going to all turn out.
Well, two questions that could maybe help clarify, because I think there's been some confusion by others. With the railroads, you had the Railroad Act that they could order them back to work, mandate that. If they invoke Taft-Hartley, can they order them back to work in the PMA to keep terminals open?
Yes. Taft-Hartley is a back to work order. It's not as strong as the Railway Labor Act. People over time have said, well, the longshoremen are, critical national security workforce, and therefore they should be under the Railway Labor Act versus under the National Labor Relations Act, which of course they vehemently would object to. It's not good. We're at the beginning of the peak season. The volumes are still relatively weak, but still there's quite a bit of cargo moving through West Coast ports. A lot of economic activity, a lot of revenue at stake, a lot of U.S. exports at stake, especially perishable exports. Prior work shutdowns have been very damaging to the economy. Studies have shown that the 2002 shutdown, the 2014-2015 shutdown actually took a little sliver off of U.S. GDP. The stakes are high. Do you think we got about 4 or 5 minutes? And I appreciate you've got another commitment there that we have to honor. Do you think the ILWU, something that we talked about early on at the beginning of the interview, is staging what I call the effect of a rolling blackout? They refused to, they shut down Oakland, but they didn't keep Oakland permanently shut down. They basically had the largest terminal operator at the Port of Long Beach go offline for a couple of days. Now they're up in Seattle, and the ag people are all upset about that because of the exports. Do you think this is the ILW's way of sending a message that, look, we can act, and we can act with impunity as we so desire if you don't settle this? Well, two things about that. In the past, disruption is a tool of negotiation. It is leverage that the union has in order to put pressure on ocean carriers. In the past, ocean carriers were oriented in a way that would make them seek to avoid disruption because of the theory that they are asset-intensive businesses, which make money only when assets are in circulation. So if ships are stopped, then it means that they're not making money. So they would tend to avoid disruption. Now, of course, that theory got turned on its head during COVID, because it was precisely because the ships were stalled that the freight rates went through the roof and they made record profits. So, so it's not so clear that on that theory, the ocean carriers are going to just capitulate the way they have done on so many occasions in the past. As to whether this is coordinated, it is interesting that the PMA in their recent press releases or public statements about the disruption has used the word coordinated. In the past, when there has been disruption associated with negotiations, the disruption has bubbled up from below, meaning that it was the locals who took matters into their own hands versus the activities being coordinated at the international level from headquarters in San Francisco. Frankly, I don't know if these are being coordinated nationally or if they're bubbling up. I just don't know. But you're right. One terminal gets shut down, it goes back online. Another one has gotten gets shut down. But I don't know who's behind it.
Yeah, let me give you a final scenario, because I'm talking with one of the senior executives for a major forwarder. He said, in essence, the ILWU lost their leverage with the incredible drop off in volume. A year and a half ago, they were in the driver's seat. Okay. Now, he was saying this is their way of sending the message that we still have leverage. But the thing that I'm just want to mention to you, Peter, because you and I briefly talked about this, right now we've talked about the bullwhip effect in the past, and what took the volumes off the cliff was the fact that a lot of companies were sitting on too much inventory. They've been working that inventory off, and now there is the expectation. I was just at this conference where I was speaking on Friday, in North Carolina, saying that demand, they're projecting a demand coming back in the fourth quarter. Do you see this potentially going into the fourth quarter?
Mike, it's very, very hard to say. I don't think there's anybody out there who could confidently offer a prediction on how long this is going to last. Literally, the people who are closest to these negotiations are themselves clueless as to how long this will go on. And so it's very, very hard to tell. If I will say this, the longer it goes on, the more disruption there's going to be.
Well, then, at what point in time, the final question, because I want to honor the commitment there, at what point in time would you see the Biden administration potentially invoking Taft-Hartley? I mean, is there any expectation?
We've been told by sources in Washington, D.C. that the Biden administration would never invoke Taft-Hartley because it would be perceived as a hostile act by their buddies in the labor movement. So that's just one source. That's a very informed source, a highly informed source. That was said to me many months ago. Basically as a kind of fait accompli. Just don't ever think that Biden would ever do that, because that would be political betrayal on his part of labor unions. So that's the only basis on which I would say that. So clearly the story is not yet fully told, but I think everybody's really in a wait and see mode at this point.
Yeah, and just for our viewers, you brought up something last week when we briefly talked, and I talked with some people that high up in the East Coast ports last week in North Carolina, and they said, if you're praying for a settlement on the West Coast, after you're done praying for the settlement, you may also want to ask God to bring some rain to the Panama Canal, because the drought is starting to have a significant impact on the volume of containers that can be efficiently cleared through the Panama Canal, which would head to the East Coast. Peter, you've been more than gracious. I can't thank you enough.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay. My pleasure to be with you.
Peter.
Take care.